Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode number 22, and welcome to the Global AI podcast. Today, we have got some awesome hosts, but before I get into that, I would like to introduce myself for those who don't know me. So, I'm Arafat, Microsoft MVP for AI, joining you from Sydney, Australia, and I'm joined by my co-host JK, who is also Microsoft MVP for AI, joining from Brisbane. And then we have got some awesome guests. We will allow them to introduce themselves. But before that, I would like to just tell you that today's topic is going to be the next generation of AI, which is the AI in image generation. So we'll talk about all about that. We'll discuss all the cool stuff. We'll also discuss some dangerous stuff as well. So over to you, Lars. If you can please introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about the next questions.
Sure, thanks, Arafat. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. Yes, I'm Lars Klint. I am an MVP, not in AI. I'm an MVP in Azure, which is like the bucket that holds AI, I think, sort of. um, yeah, wow, what do you want me to say? I am not in Sydney or Brisbane. I am almost in Melbourne, so we have like the whole East Coast covered almost. Um, and I am a senior developer advocate for Pluralsight, so I get to talk about technology all day long, which is amazing. I even get to touch code sometimes that doesn't break anything, so that's even better. But no, I've becoming very interested in AI lately, so this was a very cool opportunity to get to talk to you that may actually know something about it.
Cool, cool. So, as I've introduced in the start as well, that we'll be talking about the AI and image generation. So, now I'll start with this. That of course, 2022 and this year has been really exciting. We have seen a lot of remarkable achievements in the AI space, and we have been seeing since then. And of course, image generation was one of them. We've seen DALL-E and other image generations as well. So now someone who's deeply involved like you, Lars, and as you said that yes, you have been an MVP in Azure, who's backing up a lot of good stuff like that, and also working with different technologies. So what the question is like, is this the tech? Is this particular tech, which is an image generation, is it really? Has it come to a point which we can utilize it for some really useful cases, or it's just for fun these days?
It's a bit of both. It's like with any new technology, I think, is that we tend to gravitate to it as technologists in particular. We go, "Ooh, I wonder what I can do with this," and it becomes more of a toy initially. You go, "Oh, I'm going to press all the buttons, see what blows up." Um, Once you get over that point, especially with AI, I think, because there's so many things coming out all the time, is that then you sort of either maybe you forget about it, maybe you try and find a use for it, or maybe you already have a use for it. So I think it's sort of like most technology, it starts out being a new toy, a bit like when Azure first started. I remember sewing going, "Oh, this is kind of neat. I can spin up a worker role. I wonder what that does." Right. And then it turned out that I could actually use Azure for a whole bunch of things. And AI has sort of come in that way for me. I got access to DALL-E on OpenAI and started I actually paid for tokens. That's how much I used it. I bought more tokens to do more images. And what I started using it for me in particular, was my talks. So when I do presentations at conferences, I am not a fan of bullet points. I can't have talks that just go bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, slide, and you can almost read it from the bullet points. It's just not my style. So I do a lot of images. I try and find an image that has some sort of relevance to the topic that I'm talking about. I try and find images that aren't technical in nature, so that you get this sort of, I guess, link almost, but people tend to relate better to things that they know when they learn a new technology in this case. So I've used it for that. I did a few talks end of last year, end of 2022, where I all the images were created with DALL-E. And people didn't realize, and I just then told them at the end, I go, by the way, all these images are original AI generated, which always sort of brings a bit of a, oh, that's neat. But no one sort of thinks it's groundbreaking. But for me, it kind of was, because I didn't have to look up copyright issues and those sort of things, at least not yet. But it's just, for me, it's just eye-opening. I could say, well, actually, I want two clowns riding a bumper car in the desert, but I want it in pixel art, right? And then just does it, and you go, oh, gee, okay. And sometimes it results are less amazing, but for the most part, you get something that's workable, and you get 4 examples every time. So yeah, I have definitely found something useful for me personally, absolutely. And the other thing I find interesting is that I can reply to a tweet with a random image, right? That's just my quirky nature. I kind of get a kick out of that. Someone puts something on Twitter, ask me a question, and I reply with a pink llama jumping in cheese or something. You can do anything. That's kind of funny. So
Yeah, now definitely we know where your tokens are getting used, and you've talked about, I think, more than one use case over here, which is useful in different ways. So I'll take that in.
Yeah, and I actually used similar thing as well, DALL-E on my presentations, but I didn't end up being as lucky because a lot of them weren't that good, probably because of the topic of emails. It constantly tried to use a different kind of email.
yeah, if you put
which-
text in there, it's hit and miss for sure.
Yeah, so it took me a while, and once I figure out, I already found the right images. But going on that note, like, it's really cool, these use cases. But one thing that I personally struggle when people ask me, what is the use case and all of that stuff? How does it help me to boost productivity? What would you suggest to people so they can say, oh, wait, I actually want this to boost my productivity at work or my life?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think maybe we're trying to make it do too much sometimes. There's real value. We use images every single day in everything we do, almost, right? Very few of us live in a text-based world. So for me, as an example, I create a lot of content. I record a lot of video. I try and depart or share my love of technology through video. And that's part of my job. But I also just like getting people to that stage where they go, oh yeah, I get it. Oh, that's awesome, in whatever it is that we're talking about. And you can absolutely use images in that. But if you're a software developer and you have to create a new something UI or whatever, why placeholder images? Why can't you use AI generated images for that? If you have to create a new icon library and you are a designer, why can't you start with this and say, give me 6 examples of a I don't know, a storefront icon for this particular business, right? And then I'm not saying that's going to be perfect, but it's going to be a start. And you don't have to maybe come up with a style, or maybe you don't have to come up with all the ideas, but you have some sort of starting point. Now, I haven't seen any examples of AI lately, or ever almost, where what the end result that the end AI provides is what you put into production in inverted commas, right? It's always a matter of going, oh, that's a great, I got 80% of there. Now I need to fill out the rest of the blanks, right? If you create a model in AI, you train that model, but it's never going to be perfect, right? With images, we can get pretty damn close to perfect, but for a lot of these things, you're not going to get perfect, but it's a starting point, or maybe it's halfway. And so almost whatever technology or whatever industry you're in, there will be some sort of image use case that you need. Maybe it's create a auto-generated image every time that a new email gets sent out, a little thing, or who knows. I think we haven't seen we haven't seen even we haven't even reached the first peak of this. And once everybody has had a play with it, as I said before, and we get to this point where we got to go, okay, now we've played and we've pressed all the button, and okay, how do we actually use it? And for some people, you can't use it. Like, it's just not applicable. But that's any technology, right? Like, Python came out and it was great for many things. But hey, if you're developing, let's say firmware for a GPS device, well, you're not going to use Python probably. Everything has a use case. So when people ask, to come back to your original question, what is it that I need to use this for? What is my use case? Well, where do you use images in your daily work? Because I bet you do. You might not think about it, but I bet you do. Even if you write boring documentation, there's going to be an image at the top.
Yeah, and on that note, like I really like the way you think. It's basically one thing is that we're trying to make too much, basically trying to make it too much of the things, and it's fails when you're trying to do too much, because if you add too many descriptions, what should that image look like, right? And another thing that I like is that we don't really know what basically we can do with this yet. We haven't have enough people, enough ideas. And lastly, also the fact that some of the images, they are very close to perfection. But I noticed that as soon as there are people in it, there's a good chance that you'll hit the uncanny valley. So I was just starting to think, how can I get an image of representing what I want and maybe avoid the kind of keywords that may result in a bit uncanny valley images? And I got much better results for my presentations when I started doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And on that note, it kind of leads into where do you see this going with the how the technology can evolve, and what can happen once it gets better?
What can happen? Oh
Yes.
dear.
Where do you see
Sky's
this
the
going?
limit, right? I kind of sometimes there's been certain periods in time where when we were in it, I remember being in the dawn of the internet, for example. I was using it in sort of 95, 96 is when I started using the internet. And it was very much, it was sort of a luxury, right? Oh, you got a website. Oh, great. And then no one cared, right? Because no one used it. Having an online shop was almost impossible because no one trusted anything that had to do with payments online. It was almost like unthinkable that you would do that. And then, services like Amazon, etc., came along and sort of proved that it could work. And it's a little bit the same way now. It's sort of like people go, yeah, well, that's cool. It's really impressive. But I mean, I'm not going to use it in my everyday life. Whereas maybe you are in a couple of years, maybe that becomes a ubiquitous part of what it is that we use every day as in tooling. I definitely think AI is going to be part of that in any case, whether we want it or not. There's no denying that. In terms of images, it's a tricky question to answer. I think I can see it starting to be used to personalize ads. Say, you have your mobile scrolling hell, in whatever social media platform, where you could absolutely have ads that are tailored specifically to the user on the fly, right? So you have an ad for, say, it's a bed, and you're scrolling past it, and that bed, it happens to look like where you are based on the pictures you've posted, maybe, or something like that, right? And you could absolutely have algorithms like that. Now, getting past that uncanny valley, and not suddenly putting, a rhinoceros in your bed, like you got to get past those things, right? Otherwise, it gets weird. But we can absolutely do that. We're very early days of this. Like DALL-E came out when, July or something? I don't remember. But it's not that long ago, right? So we're very early in this piece. We're getting better and better. The more we use it, the better it gets, hopefully, if they have got the algorithms correctly. But I think there's real value in creating images on the fly for something like that. I mean, that was just the best example I could think of the top of my head.
Yeah, and this brings me to another sensitive question for some folks, like the design folks. I know that we are not designers, what we are discussing over here, but images are being used by everyone, right? And we have seen, Lars, that there have been, I've personally seen on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well, that a couple of people have started blaming these new tech companies who are generating or creating these generative AI generative AI, which is creating images, or which is generating images. That the art is not super good, and the design language, this is not how the design language works. That's really bad. So what do you want to say to them? Like, well, as in, like, yes, I know we are not designers, but I think we are going to a path that it is going to be useful. What are your thoughts around that?
There's two sides to the coin, right? The one is that, yeah, it's a new technology and it might be scary to some people where you see a direct impact. And you sort of go, well, I'll just poo-poo it because it's not very good yet. But the other side of it is like, well, these people aren't going to give up. Right? We have all this now knowledge and all these models created and all these services. They're not going to go away. Some of them will die. Some of them are going to fall away. Some of them are not very good. But there'll be some that persevere and they'll get better and better and better. So why not at this point trying to understand what it is it does and then use that? It's a little bit like, when the car came out and says, no, I'm just going to keep selling horses. I don't like cars. There'll never be anything, right? You're going to have to sort of move with it because it's not going to go away. You're not going to be able to ignore it as much as you try. So yeah, I get the frustration and I get especially around the copyright things where people go, hang on, that's exactly like something I did apart from those 2 pixels there or something. I get that, and we need to solve those issues because that's not fair. But in a sense, this is original art, and it can be very good, and it can be a tool for designers as well. And go, well, I know how to use these AI tools to my benefit. I know how to create even better outcomes rather than sort of going, no, the only thing that works is my pencil. Right? It's the pencil is part of your toolkit, and AI image generation is probably another part of your toolkit. And if you embrace it and you understand and you work with it, I think you'll be better off because you'll be one step ahead and you understand how you can then suddenly provide things much better, faster, in depth, variety, whatever it is that you were looking for.
Yeah, and what is very interesting is at my work where everyone is technical, it's very interesting that quite a lot are basically thinking about, well, what about the artist? Is it, is it the right thing, DALL-E? And that is a very good question, which I'll come back to it a little bit later about
Sure.
the training process. But first off, to just continue on with Arafat's question, one of the issues that some people find is the images that are basically maliciously generated, either depicting violence or different things.
Mhm.
Like DALL-E does pretty good job for nudity and a few other things, but it's still a bit far from filtering everything. So what's your take on this?
Well, we got to solve it. I mean, I agree. We can't allow these tools to just generate anything that we like, because it's at the end of the day, you're using someone else's algorithm and someone else's tool. So there is some shared responsibility. Like, you shouldn't ask for it in the first place, sure. But then if you do, there should be some mechanism to sort of go, hey, we don't do this. That's not the service. Right. Whereas if you have a pencil, you can do whatever you want, but then it's on you. Right? It's 100% on you. So yeah, I see that's a problem. But I think it's a solvable problem, and it's a problem that the industry is extremely aware of, because any of a number of different types of images could be a death sentence for any of these services, right? So I'm confident that they are extremely aware of the problems with those things, but it's solvable. I have no doubt it's 100% solvable. But it's never going to be perfect. Something will keep sneaking through. I'm sure there's always some teenager with too much time on their hands. They will try and figure out where it's broken. Right? We're not going to get past that, but it's a solvable problem for sure.
And do you think that it is another version of the deep fake where I'm taking your image, Lars, and talking in the llama's voice, or something else?
I don't know. Deepfake is a very specific use case. It's
Mm.
sort of gone away again. It's not really used
Yeah.
a lot, apart from a few videos where people say, "Hey, this is a deepfake." And I think there's absolutely tools for identifying these sort of original creations. Um, with deepfake, you could implement some sort of hashing that would go with the image or with the original image, or like there's ways that you can set up services or set up mechanisms that will say whether this is fake or real, or not fake or real. That's really not the right terminology. Whether this is an original or not, or whatever your terminology wants to be. But I think there are definitely mechanisms that we will have to develop. I'm not sure they're all here yet. But yeah, it's deepfake. For some reason, I'm not that worried about. I think the static images are possibly worse until we get to the full video generation of anything. That could be problematic as well. But again, this is the way we're doing it, and we're going to have to come up with tools. There's always going to be someone that does something nefarious with what we do, right? Look at cloud computing. Go back to 2015, 2016. People were running crypto mining on cloud computing, right? People are running ransomware. The reason the Hive ransomware was running on a cloud service in Los Angeles, right? There's always going to be someone that tries to find some way of going around the system. That's just what humans do. So yeah, we need to be aware of it, but we can absolutely solve those problems. I have no doubt.
Yeah, and yeah, I have seen some good deep fakes with deep fakes. You probably have done. I think I saw some of those space astronauts where it puts your face on stylish images. Yeah, and it's very interesting because people are somewhere between, hey, you're taking art from artists. On the other hand, this looks really, really cool. Like just being able to take a couple of your own pictures, and all of a sudden you are in different scenarios, different poses, dresses, and it actually looks really cool.
I did those too.
Yeah. But leading to that, and also grabbing the hook from previously, is what do you think about how we train all of these models? Like right now, I have lots of debates about this, and I'll let you give your opinion on that. But there's a lot of opinion on what should be allowed, what shouldn't be allowed, how it should be the training and stuff like that. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, again, the AI is never more perfect than what the data you put into it, right? So the modeling that you do needs to have some sort of good data in order to create a good model for that particular implementation. And that's an issue because most of the data is publicly available, but is not publicly consumable without limitations, if that makes sense. So yes, you could scrape all of Google and you could get all the Google images off Google, but a lot of them are copyrighted. So what do? Well, you try and find some sort of data set, and this is always the problem, that is sanitized, right? That has some sort of known input so that you can train a model saying, hey, I kind of know what's going to go into this. And that was the service we talked about before. That was one of the problems they had, was that artists could, with very little doubt, prove that the images they were generating and that they were putting, say, my face on an astronaut or on a cowboy or whatever, those images were actually made by this particular artist or these particular groups or whatever. That was not a difficult stretch of the imagination. So yeah, that is a problem because we're now capitalizing on someone else's work and then claiming it's not, right? So yeah, it's an issue, and we need to get around that. Maybe that becomes, a royalty model. I don't know, but how do you prove it? How do you work around it? I'm not sure I have the right answer for that. It's probably one of the harder things to solve. But again, it's not going to go away. So we have to find a way around it. We have to make sure we solve these issues so that, well, not everybody's happy, but most.
Can I just add something? My takes usually are we need to kind of figure out what basically we allow to learn the machines and what we allow to for humans to learn, because kind of right now they're not the same thing if you really think about it, and fair use also isn't basically applied the same on whether it's an AI or machine. And I think we maybe need to step backwards instead of asking whether it's okay for the machine to learn this way. and then actually ask ourselves, what is the right way? Do we want to make a difference between how humans can learn and it's fair, and how machines? Because once the machines got really, really intelligence, this problem is going to be on a completely different level. So that's going to be very interesting to tackle.
Yeah, but that
wow. My brain hurts by that.
Yes.
but by the time it happens, I think there will be a lot of concerns on um, from different aspects, and one of the aspects, Lars, is bias. So how do we tackle this problem? What is your opinion, like as a user first, and then as
Mm.
creators? Because we have seen like every accessible AI system, be it OpenAI, be it ChatGPT, be it any other system, even Bing, new Bing, whatever we are writing it to it, and if it is learning from that, which it is, then how do we tackle it as a user? Should we stop asking nasty questions, or should we, as a creator as well, what should we do, and as a user, what should we do? So two aspects of this question.
Sure. Well, we can't blame the user, right? That's what we like to do as software developers. It's like, well, it wasn't designed to do that. Why'd you click that button? Right? User's going to do that. User's going to break whatever can break. That's just the nature of things. Um, Whereas we, as technologists or the developers of it, we need to understand these problems. And yeah, you were saying with the biased, there's definitely some issues there. As an example, I have a friend in the US who is African American, and when he did the whole astronaut, cowboy, whatever it was we were saying before, it came up as Caucasian in most places, right? It's like, yeah, but he's obviously very dark skinned. Like, it was just weird. And that was one of the issues with that particular service, no question. And hopefully that's something they fixed. Um, I don't think anyone does this on purpose. I don't think the bias is something that's been built into these services necessarily. I don't think we're at that point where we have these sort of extremist groups that will build services to do their thing. I just don't think that's the case. So with that sort of frame of mind, that like, no, I think they're trying to do the right thing. Well, they're going to fix these things as well as they are aware of them, no question. Because why wouldn't you? So it's as a community service, it's good for your community, for for your brand, but it's also good for business. So why would you not? So yeah, I think there's definitely problems in that, and I'm not I'm not sure. I haven't built any of these services myself, so it's tricky to sort of say where does this unintentional bias come from. But it's probably coming from the creators, right? You don't. It's what we do as humans. We look out, we find people that look like us.
Yeah, I think it's a good phrase for that is, you don't what you don't know, but once you know it, you should action it. So
Sometimes you do know what you don't know.
that is true, although you don't know to what extent you have the bias until you hit it. That's what I mean.
It's one of the problems, or one of the challenges with our industry as well, is that we have to be so damn fast all the time, right? So we can't wait a year before we put something out into the world, right? We have to sort of go, no, what we think is ready, yeah, ship it, because otherwise we'll lose the momentum and we lose the eyes on it, and then sometimes that goes really wrong. As we're recording this, the new Bing with ChatGPT is getting a bit of publicity because people found ways to entice it to say things that it wasn't trained to say. That's going to happen because we are so busy being first and pushing it out in the world, because that's what our industry wants. So that's part of the issue as well, is that we don't have years to test this in a closed lab. It just doesn't happen, right? So we're going to have to expect that there are things that will go wrong.
Yeah, and going a little bit off topic, right now the GPT-3 does not learn from the inputs. It keeps a bit of context. But I'm a little bit concerned with the Google's bot, because it actually learns from it. And now imagine having the same issues as Bing, but not for everyone. With the GPT-3, at least it's within a session. So you can coerce it to say whatever you want. But if you choose another session, it's like a fresh thing. So that's the major difference. So I'm not too concerned right now about Bing regarding that. It's not great, but not too bad. But
Sure.
what a lot of people would be concerned, going back to DALL-E and image generation, is like designers and other people who works with art. Should they be worried? Should they be like, is my job now finding keywords and then going through images? Or is my expertise still useful? Or do I need to change how I do things?
There's a big difference between creating something you think is art and having an eye for art, or having an eye for design, right? I can create 100 images and I can say what I like, but I don't have that keen eye that goes, yeah, but you know what? If you just move this or whatever, then that would be great. And I don't think that's going to change, because again, we're training models on the input that we give them. And unless we have, someone that for every single image gives a consistent answer, well, it's going to vary, isn't it? So I think that as designers, yeah, we're going to keep needing their services. What they might not have to do is all the what I call boring jobs, which, yeah, I'm sure that's someone's job and they might enjoy it, but all the things where you go, what this really is kind of, it could just be generated, right? But the putting together a whole brand marketing campaign and figuring out which colors to use and how to put it all together, and creating assets for different things. I don't see AI taking over that process. It might generate some of the things that you need, absolutely, based on whatever input you give it. But again, it's got to be a designer that inputs it. And again, art is unique. Just because some AI thing created a bunch of images doesn't mean that you can't create images either, right? And maybe it becomes even more desirable to have someone that painted an actual painting rather than a digital image. Who knows? We might actually put more emphasis on it. A bit like if you buy a Hyundai today, a car in run of the mills, it's like buying a new fridge. No one cares, right? It's just basically another clone of the previous one. But if you are into cars, you're like, no, I want that 1962 Ferrari 250B or whatever, right? Because that is one of the sort of, you appreciate the custom and the uniqueness and everything about it. So I don't know. I'm not sure that AI art on images is going to really put people out of work as such, if you are sort of a true designer, whatever you want to call it. And even if you're a front-end designer, front-end developer, well, you're still going to have to implement some of these things, right? It's going to be a tool like everything else. It's going to replace some people, and that's sad, but that's always technology. But in the end, I think it's going to be a tool that makes us more efficient and better at probably creating a better product, I think.
Yeah, to kind of summarize that, as a consultant, basically every time you do anything, they'll just say, just do a little this and do a little that. We just want the same thing, just do little these changes. And doing that with AI generation would be very difficult, because you'll get a completely different image. And in a way, to summarize all of that, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially the work that doesn't require to be creative in making the images, but creative of what you want from an image to convey, that can be offloaded with AI generation, whereas creative work where you really want to be generating something very specific, like for movies, or basically mascots, or very specific UI designs or designs of posters, those kind of works are going to be more creative in a way, because anything that is somewhat trivial to make, you can generate. So now you can focus on making real art, in a sense. But that's
a bit like software development, isn't it? Yeah, that's what we do with software development. We don't write the data access layer anymore, pretty much, right? It's generated, which means we can do all the cool stuff that's actually interesting, So yeah, I think it's the same sort of. It's just because it's so new and it's so shiny and it's so visual that we probably have more of a tendency to go and sort of a hair on fire approach to it,
Yeah.
at least initially.
I hope this gives a
Yeah.
little bit more positive spin to anyone who's doing design and art, not to be too freaked out, but more like, oh wait, I can do more of my work. I can focus
Yeah.
more on my work rather than doing that all of the other art that I don't really want to do.
Yep. It's not going away. You might as well get the most out of it.
Yeah, I think if we keep on discussing this, it will take us weeks, if not months, to finish up just one aspect of it. But we are right here at the time, so it's always nice to have experts like you, Lars, who have worked on different set of technologies, to learn about their opinions of the next generation of AI. So very good, and it was really nice to have you. So surely we'll come back to you, our listeners, with our next awesome guest with another cool topic. And until then, take care and have a great time with your loved ones. Thank you.